You're not watching this video by chance. Your soul brought you here because it's time to remember who you are. Thoth left behind a hidden secret, a vibrational formula that, when activated, makes your soul recognize itself. But this awakening doesn't happen through pretty words. It starts when you tune into the right frequency. And the craziest part? That frequency has always been inside you, but the world taught you to ignore it. They shaped you, they programmed you, and while you obeyed, your essence fell asleep. But now, that's changing. Because if you're feeling this call, the veil has already started to tear, and if you stay until the end of this video, you'll understand that remembering is not an idea. It's a vibration, and when it awakens, nothing in the world can dim your light. The light you seek in temples, stars, or books already shines silently at the center of your chest, but it only awakens when the external sound ceases. Before everything existed as matter, you were vibration, a conscious, pulsing frequency, fully present in complete harmony with the whole. No name, no form, no limits, just living vibration. And that vibration wasn't random. It carried intelligence, a memory, an intimate recognition of what you truly are, not a body, not a mind, but a pure emanation of the source. But this frequency, so subtle and infinite, had to go through a process to become visible, touchable, experienceable. It had to descend. And in doing so, something happened. What was light became dense. What was untouchable became matter. What was essence turned into form. And this transition wasn't instantaneous. It was a narrowing, like a spiral closing in, condensing, until it turned into a body, a name, an identity. But in this process of densification, something started to get covered up. Imagine a clear crystal submerged in dark ink. The crystal is still there. It still pulses. It still emits light. But you can no longer see it clearly, not because it disappeared, but because it was covered. And the same happened with your soul. It didn't get lost. It didn't fade away. It was just overlapped by layers, by weights, by stories. The first layer, fear. When you arrived in this plane, still very sensitive, you encountered a noisy world full of stimuli, tensions, expectations, and that intense vibration started to cause discomfort. You began to protect yourself, to close off, to create a vibrational armor, to adapt. The second layer, belief. Since you were little, ideas started being placed in you. What's right? What's wrong? What's possible? What's dangerous? What's beautiful? What's ugly? Each of these ideas started shaping your field, and with every new belief, another layer formed. The third layer, trauma. Every pain that isn't understood turns into a blockage. Every repressed emotion turns into energetic stiffness. And every painful experience that wasn't welcomed left vibrational marks on you. These marks didn't disappear with time. They accumulated, they hardened, and became part of the density you now carry. And so, layer by layer, your original vibration was getting obscured, not eliminated, just muffled, covered. And the most dangerous thing is that you started to identify with these layers. You started to believe you were them, that you were fear, that you were pain, that you were the role they gave you. And you forgot that behind all of this, an untouchable essence still vibrates. The ancients knew this. In Egypt, they spoke of the Ba and the Ka, aspects of the soul that remained alive even after death, even after everything was stripped away because they couldn't be corrupted. In the Vedas, this same concept was called Atman, the eternal self, the unchanging spark. In Greece, Plato spoke of the soul as a prisoner of form, wrapped in a body, like a light trapped in a cave. Thoth was more direct. He said that the world of form is a school, a symbolic field where the soul learns, but also gets lost if it's not awake. He spoke of the first fall as the moment when the original vibration drifted away from the center, and that distance led to forgetting not as a failure, but as part of the game of density, as a test, a challenge of vibration. But the secret is that the original vibration never disappears. It may be dormant, silent, but it's there, vibrating, always waiting for you to look inward, because what was covered can be revealed. And to reveal it, you don't need to search outside. You need to cross through the fear, cross through the stiffness, cross through the voice that tells you you're small. Go beyond the image they created of you. Feel the discomfort of breaking through these layers, because behind them is the frequency that was never lost, the living point, the vibrational core that still pulses like in the beginning. And it's closer than you think, not with your eyes, but with your feeling. And when you start to notice the first signs of this, the vibration changes. Something moves in the invisible. Something starts to reorganize. And that something will emerge with strength in the next revelations. The truth, without an owner, the ancestral memory that unites all peoples. And when that vibration starts to rise from the depths of forgetting, something curious happens. It doesn't speak in words. It recognizes. It resonates. It finds, within you, a memory that didn't come from this life. It didn't come from childhood, nor from what you read or heard. It's something older, as if there were a memory that was never taught, but that you've always carried. And the most fascinating part is realizing that this kind of memory isn't individual, it's ancestral. Entire civilizations, separated by oceans, by centuries, by languages that never crossed paths, spoke of the same thing, in different ways, with distinct symbols, but always pointing to the same central point. The soul is not here to learn something new, it's here to remember. In Egyptian temples, the hierophants said that initiation was a process of reunion with what has always been present. In the heart of the Andes, the Quechua shamans spoke of chula, the point of luminous singularity that exists in every being. In the Vedas, the concept of smriti didn't just mean memory, it meant the remembrance of what is eternal. In all these traditions, one truth kept repeating: what is real doesn't need to be taught, only remembered. And it wasn't just a pretty idea, it was a deep spiritual practice. This truth was protected, whispered, guarded like a flame lit in the midst of darkness, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because remembering without being ready is like trying to look at the sun with your eyes still closed. It blinds, it confuses, it distorts. That's why this knowledge wasn't exposed. It was veiled, passed from master to disciple, not through sentences, but through vibration. Every symbol carved in the ancient stones carried more than a meaning. It carried a frequency. It was like a code, a portal that, when activated by the right gaze, awakened a silent memory, a truth without an owner, without borders, without labels. There was no manual, no guidebook, because each soul accesses this memory in its own unique way, and the role of the ancients wasn't to explain. It was to provoke, to create the space where the memory could naturally emerge. They knew that spiritual truth can't be pushed. It needs to be recognized. And that's why all these cultures, even without knowing each other, pointed to the same path, the return to vibrational essence. A return that doesn't happen through accumulating knowledge, but through letting go of excess. That's why true initiates lived in silence. Because in silence, the soul speaks. And when it speaks, it's not about having a conversation. It's about recognition. A kind of reunion with something you feel is absolutely true, even without understanding it with the mind. It's as if your whole being says, yes, this has always been here. And now, I remember. This is the point where you start to realize that you're not just accessing ideas, but touching a living frequency, an intelligence that has always existed and has never stopped vibrating. And when you enter this field, you start to feel something different in the air, a light tension, a vibrational expectation, as if something is about to be revealed. And when that frequency starts to vibrate more strongly, the soul feels that something needs to be crossed. And it's not new knowledge, it's a crossing, a rite, something that existed before history was even written. The ancients knew that to truly remember, it wasn't enough to contemplate. You had to die, but not the body. It was what was behind the mask, what we call the self. In the oldest temples, accessible only to those who were ready, the rituals weren't symbolic. They were alive. They were vibrational portals carefully built to provoke a rupture. There, the mystery wasn't explained. It was lived. In hidden chambers, far from the eyes of the people, initiates were led into altered states of consciousness, and not by substances, but by vibration. It was a dive into darkness, literally. For hours, days, or even weeks, the initiate stayed in absolute silence, deprived of light, in sacred spaces where time seemed suspended. And in that environment, something started to happen. First, the physical body quieted down. Then, thoughts lost their rhythm. And then, like a whisper crossing the void, the soul began to detach from the structure that held it. That separation wasn't a light unfolding. It was intense. Painful. Because to cross the veil, everything that was still illusion had to be burned away. And that included ideas, identities, attachments, memories, everything you believed yourself to be. The initiate was brought to a state of ego collapse, a kind of conscious death where every layer built by the mind was undone in the presence of the living inner truth. But what guided this process wasn't a person. It was the space, the vibration, the symbols engraved on the walls, the geometric patterns, the energy fields anchored by generations. Everything there was alive. The hieroglyphs weren't decoration. They were encoded frequencies, keys, hidden maps of consciousness. When the initiate faced them in a state of deep surrender, something opened up inside them, and they crossed. But crossing that threshold required total surrender, because when you enter, you don't know if you'll come out the same, and many didn't. Some came back confused, others never came back the same. Not because they went mad, but because they could no longer wear the character they carried before. They lost the ability to fit into the world they once knew. That's why these rituals were secret, forbidden to those seeking out of curiosity or vanity. The truth demands renunciation, and not everyone is willing to lose what they never were. Thoth warned, crossing the invisible is not about going up to another world. It's about stripping yourself here. It's about letting everything false dissolve. And that's scary, because we're not used to seeing ourselves without a mask. In the temples, that revelation was direct, without mediation, without words. It was a presence that saw you completely, that stripped you until only what is real remained. And the real is unbearable for those still clinging to illusion. The ego doesn't go with you. The first barrier is internal. It is at this point that the real obstacle reveals itself. It is not outside. It is not the world, nor the other, nor the darkness. It is what you built inside yourself to avoid feeling the light. It is the ego, the character, the voice that tells you who you should be, what you should fear, what you need to achieve to be accepted. Thoth was direct. No one crosses the invisible carrying the false self, because it cannot withstand the frequency of truth. It dissolves. If you enter this field in a hurry, wanting control, wanting to prove something, wanting to reach a higher state, you won't pass. And it's not punishment. It's protection. Because crossing with the ego awake is like trying to fly with chains on your feet. You might jump, but you won't go anywhere. The first barrier is not mystical. It is internal. And the most challenging part is that it has your face. It thinks with your thoughts. It dresses in your desires. But it is not you. It is the version you learn to maintain to survive in this world. The one that needs to be right. That needs to be praised. That needs to stand out. That needs to be recognized. This structure was necessary for a time, but now it is what holds you back. And the moment this structure starts to crumble can be terrifying, because when it begins to break, you feel as if you are falling apart, as if you are losing control of your own life. But what is breaking is not you. It is what was preventing you from feeling who you really are. The ego doesn't die screaming. It dies in silence. The moment you stop fighting, stop resisting, and start simply feeling. But this process is not comfortable. Remembering who you are takes courage, because remembering means feeling again everything that was ignored. It is revisiting the pains that were pushed to the bottom. It is looking at the shadows you hid from yourself, and that is scary. That is why many give up at this point, because they think they are regressing, that they are getting worse. But in reality, they are cleansing. And when you go through this cleansing, something very subtle starts to happen. It is not a vision, not a voice. It is a vibration, a soft warmth in the center of the chest, a peace that doesn't need explanation, a silent certainty that, even in the middle of chaos, you are coming home. This is the first sign. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. And no one can give it to you. No master, no book, no doctrine. Because this vibration is not learned, it is activated. And when it activates, you can never fully identify with the old character again. You might return to the world, but you are no longer led by it. Something inside you starts to observe, to notice, to vibrate with more presence. And this is only the beginning of the true crossing. And it is precisely when this vibration starts to take shape inside you, silent and deep, that something changes in your way of perceiving. You are no longer looking at the world with the same eyes. What was once interpreted with effort is now felt with clarity. There is no longer so much mental noise. The urgency to understand disappears, because now you see with another part of yourself. Thoth called this the single eye, not a physical eye, not a symbolic concept, but a living perception, a center of consciousness that exists beyond common senses. He said this eye doesn't need to open, because it was never closed. It was just forgotten. And when it activates, there is no more need to search, because presence becomes the answer. You stop seeking and start perceiving. The single eye doesn't interpret. It doesn't think. It doesn't rush. It simply is. It sees not only what is in front of you, but also what is behind. It sees through forms, through masks, through layers. It penetrates the invisible effortlessly. And for the first time, you don't feel separated from anything. It's as if everything is being seen from within, as if you have become part of the very vision. This perception is not emotional, nor rational. It is vibrational. It comes as a clarity without a reason, a lucidity without explanation. You look at something, and it seems to be looking back at you, but not with eyes, with consciousness. And suddenly you realize that you have always been surrounded by signs. That life was never random, that everything is in sync, but only reveals itself to those who know how to observe without trying to control. And that changes everything. Because when you see with this eye, the external world no longer hypnotizes you. Stories lose their weight, conflicts lose their drama, and the questions stop screaming. Because in that state, you are no longer trying to understand life. You are present in it. The mind steps back, the body quiets down, the field expands, and something new starts to vibrate in a different place. This vibration doesn't come from outside. It is not captured by the ears, but you feel it is there, as if the space around you is becoming more alive, as if there is a sound that makes no sound, but still pulses, and that sound seems to be calling you from a place you cannot locate, but that feels closer and closer. It cannot be explained, but it can no longer be ignored. It is like an echo coming from within your own field, like a frequency that has always been there, waiting for the right moment to be heard. And maybe that moment has arrived now. The encounter with the shadow, when the soul decides to heal. The more this silent presence grows within you, the more evident a sound becomes that doesn't belong to the physical world. It is not sound in the usual sense. It doesn't echo in the air. It isn't produced by vocal cords, nor can it be recorded by human devices. But it vibrates. It vibrates in a region so subtle and deep that it can only be perceived in the space between thoughts. A space where the body's senses withdraw and only the soul remains alert. This sound doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't pass through the ears, nor is it interpreted by the brain. It is heard by another kind of listening, one that only reveals itself when everything inside you quiets down. And when that happens, it's as if something ancestral is reactivated, something that has been sleeping within you since the beginning of your journey in matter. A vibrational memory, a calling that doesn't use words, but speaks directly to the heart. It is the name that was never spoken. Thoth called this frequency the soul's sound seed, a primary vibration that precedes any language created by man. It is the original sound, the first emission, the divine note that shapes the energetic identity of each consciousness. It isn't taught by books, nor transmitted by voices. It is felt like a silent whisper echoing directly from your center, a vibrational password that, when activated, reorganizes your energy field with cosmic precision. This sound doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be remembered, because when it touches you, something awakens within with a clarity that needs no explanations. Your body vibrates in unison. Your emotions fall silent, your mind bows, and the soul smiles. It's like returning to a home you've never seen with physical eyes, but have always recognized with the eyes of the spirit. This sound is the point of origin of your conscious existence. It doesn't give you a new name. It gives you back the memory of what you are. It doesn't tell you who you should be. It simply reveals what has always been asleep. And when it vibrates strongly enough within you, it begins a transformation that goes beyond human understanding. But this activation doesn't happen through desire or effort. It happens in a state of surrender, when the mind quiets down, when wanting dissolves, when silence becomes stronger than any thought. It is in that formless space, without time, without identity, that the sound of the soul begins to vibrate freely. And this vibration brings light. But it is not a comfortable light made only of peace. It is a light that reveals, that illuminates what has been hidden, what has been ignored, what has been feared. Because when the soul's light grows, it shines even on the deepest shadows. And in that moment you start to see everything you spent years avoiding. Old wounds, forgotten memories, fears disguised as strength, masks you wore for survival, emotional patterns that no longer make sense. Everything comes to the surface, not as punishment, but as healing. Thoth said this was the most delicate moment of the spiritual journey, because it's easy to run from pain. It's easy to deny what rises from the unconscious, but everything that appears in the light does so because it is ready to be embraced. And if you have the courage to look without judgment, with tenderness, with compassion, you begin the great inner alchemy to gather again the parts of yourself that had been broken. And there is no greater power than that. True healing is not about erasing the past. It is allowing what was wounded to finally find a place to belong. It is offering comfort to the forgotten child. It is allowing fear to be embraced without needing to scream anymore. It is looking with the soul's eyes at the parts of yourself that just wanted to be seen. When that happens, something magical begins. The ego relaxes. It realizes it no longer needs to fight to protect what is already safe. It doesn't need to control what is already at peace. And in that space, the soul begins to occupy the center of your being, not as a beautiful concept, but as a living, pulsing, sovereign presence. And then everything changes. You start looking at the world from a new axis. Nothing around you needs to change for everything to change, because your frequency changes. And when the soul vibrates in command, reality bends to your vibration. People respond differently. Opportunities arise with more flow. Time seems to slow down. The universe reorganizes around you, because finally, you are aligned with the melody of your existence. This sound that vibrates within you, even without words, is the sound of return. It is the silent note that guides the soul back home. And the more you quiet yourself inside, the louder it sounds. Not in your ears, but in the eternity pulsing within you. The return to the source, when you stop searching and start being. When the soul begins to take the lead, something surprising happens. You keep living in the same world, but it no longer controls you like it did before. The same settings, the same voices, the same challenges. But now, there's a space between what happens and how you respond. That space is sacred, because it is where true freedom is born. Thoth called this state awakened trance, a vibrational paradox. You are present, whole, attentive, and at the same time, you realize that almost everyone around you is still dreaming. Dreaming of the past, dreaming of the future, trapped in roles, expectations, automatic reactions. And this is when the real test begins. It is not about crossing the invisible. It is about holding the vibration while walking in the visible. The alchemist does not escape the world. He transforms it from within, and that transformation doesn't happen through words or teachings. It happens through presence, through the way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you look, the way you stay centered when everything around seems to fall apart. That is the soul's gold, to maintain the vibration even in the midst of chaos. But that gold requires vigilance, because the world will test you. Old situations will reappear. People who vibrate in fear will cross your path. And the question will always be the same. Will you react with the old or sustain the new? The soul's remembrance is not an explosion. It is a reverberation. It starts like a breath, and if you nurture it, it grows. If you trust it, it deepens, until it reaches a point where it never leaves, because it becomes who you are. And at that moment, you realize that you don't need to seek anymore. The search was useful, but now you have returned, and you didn't return to the past. You returned to your center, to the point of origin, that place that is nowhere yet vibrates within you like a secret heart, a silent temple, an unshakable presence. This point cannot be described. It must be inhabited. You stop looking for signs because you realize you are the sign itself. You stop chasing after answers because you realize the answer is your own presence. You stop striving to become something because you already are. Thoth said this was the true return, not to an external place, nor to a distant memory, but to the living remembrance that pulses in the now. This is the point where body and soul are no longer separated, where time loses its grip, where the heart and mind finally align. Here, there is no hurry, no need to prove anything, because the truth you carry no longer depends on external acceptance. It simply is, and whoever reaches this point never gets lost again. Because even if the world tries to confuse you, there is something inside that will never fade, and it is that something that guides you from here on. If you felt this remembrance vibrating inside you, leave it in the comments. I am awakening with Thoth. This phrase activates a collective vibrational field and strengthens even more your connection with who you truly are. Oh, and if you want to help this channel spread more content like this around the world, you can contribute directly. The link is in the first pinned comment. Every bit of help vibrates together with the mission. And before you leave, there is a special video waiting for you on the screen. Click now to continue this journey and meet us there. Your soul will know it's the next step.